Have you ever wished for UI components that are not only powerful but also flexible enough so that you can adopt them to any design system or styling approach? Well, you're in luck because in this series, we'll be creating headless UI components in React from scratch that will empower you to build robust and reusable interfaces like never before. So we'll start from the buttons and then we will move on to drop downs, carousels, and modals. So we'll try to cover most of the basic components that are required to create a project. These components will be completely decoupled from any specific styling library or framework, giving you the freedom to style them your way with your preferred libraries or your preferred styling approach. So let's get started. Right, so as you can see here, we have a new project setup that is just using very basic code. I have created a home component which is just outputting some h1 and some content just to test out if the project is working fine. Now the project is running. If we can quickly just switch to the browser, we can see that the project is running fine. We have the title and the content as well. Now let's jump back into the code. So I've created an empty button component that we are going to create. So I'll just collapse this one and I'll try to increase the font size as well. Right. Let's first import the React library. So we will just import that. So what we need to do is we need to create a button prop TypeScript type so that we can then use that into that button component that we are going to create. So we will start from there and then we will move forward with the main button component logic. So what we are going to define is we are going to do a generic type for the button props, and then let's start to define that as well. Right, so type button props, and we are going to create it a generic type. So again, let me just quickly, right, so it's a generic type of button, and then we are using component props without ref to define the type, and the type is button. So if you use these component props or component props without ref or component props with ref, now again, you can, if you don't know, you can check it in the documentation how they are used. So you can use component props here as well, but since we don't want any refs to this button, so we've just put component props without ref. Right, so next bit, let's start to define it. So we'll just, first thing would be the variant. So what we want, so the variants would be primary, secondary, and tertiary for now. Then again, we can modify it, or based on requirements we can create differently, but that's the first parameter or the prop that we want to define. Then we want to define the size. You'll see later on how this gets added into the component, but for now let's just keep on defining some of the different properties that we want in the button component. So the size, let's just have 3 different sizes to give you some control. Then obviously we need a way to disable the button on certain conditions, so that we need. Another thing we need is whether the button is loading. If the button is used to perform asynchronous operations, then that loading indicator can be used to style it. And if we want, we can then define an icon as well. So the icon can be dual purpose. It can be an icon for the button, but it can be an icon to just show you when it's loading. So it depends on how you want to have that logic applied. Then let's just add one other thing, which is full width. If we want the button to be full width in specific requirements, so that prop can be used for that. And now finally we can just end this component definition, right? So we have been able to create the type. Now let's start to create our button component. Right. Let's quickly add some of the things we need here. So it should have a React node. Then we need component props without ref as well. So now we are good. Right. Now let's start to define our main component. So let's first just start with what we want to do. We're going to create the button component as a generic functional component. Right. So the next bit would be button definition. So it will use the button props as the type. And then let's start to give it the different props. First is the variant, then it's the size. Then we are going to give disabled, loading, and icon, full width. Right. Now, just to make it more flexible, we want to add class name as well. So that can be passed inside the component. That will allow the end user or the person who is going to use this component apply styles based on their class names. And finally the children and rest of the props. And let's just see. Now you'll notice we have not defined class names or the children here, but they can be used from the component props without ref. So that way it will help us to make it work. Right. Right now, let me first include FC here, and then let's just do use state as well. Let me reduce the size. Right. I think we have what we need. And here, let me import the class names library. This library is used to apply the class names based on specific conditions, and it just helps to create the list of classes for our class names for this button. So that's how we will use it. Now I think we have what we need. I'll just have a quick look. And now let's just start to define our state variables. So first of all, we need is pressed, just so we can define whether the button is pressed or not. Then whether it's hovered or not. Some of these we will add them into the class list. Right. And then we want to determine the class name based on variant prop and all other props. So let's just create this variable called combined class names, and we will use the class names library. Then we will just pass on the first default class, then the variant, whatever the variant is, we want that in the class name as well. Then the size that we've passed, And now some of the conditional classes that we want to add, whether it's disabled or it's loading or if it's full width. And if button is pressed, then we want button pressed class as well. And if button over, if the button is hovered and it's not pressed. And finally, we would just include the class names which are getting passed to it externally to this component. So that will also be used. Right. Now let's just define the return. Right. So we'll just return the button and then class names that we've defined the variable combined class name we will use here. Then disabled if it's disabled or loading. And on mouse down is we will set is pressed. That way it will add the class to the class list. On mouse up we will add that, and on mouse enter we will just set the hovered condition, and on mouse leave we will set it to false. Now with the loading, we want to add that loader class and the icon that was passed, so we'll just add that icon as well. Right. I just want to pass one other thing, which would be children. And then let's just close this and finally close this app as well. Right. I think our button component is almost ready, so we can just test it as well. Let me just export the button as well. I'm just going to double check. Yeah, looks all good. So let's come to our home component. Let's just import our button component. Oh, by the way, I've created the links, so I'll just use those. Hopefully it should work. And then let's just define the button. First of all, we need the variant. Let's call it primary. Size, let's call it medium. And let's just call the button as primary. Right, so let's quickly check our, as you can see, our primary button has been added. So I just want to quickly test all other different scenarios that we created. So let me just go back to the library. Let's quickly just create a secondary button and then tertiary. This could be small, this could be large. This could be disabled. just to differentiate. Right. Yeah, I think we have all the buttons there. Now let's add the loading one as well. Let's just call it loading through loading. Right. Anything else that we want? Yeah, maybe let's just set this to full width. Right. If we just check different classes, let's just quickly check here. Let me just dock this one here. And let's see this primary button classes. So you'll see we have headless button, we have primary, we have medium. If we hover over it, you'll see that button hover is added. And if I'll press it, you will see the button pressed class is added. So you can see all the interaction functionality we have added to the button, and this functionality then can be easily styled based on any kind of style library or even standard CSS as well. So you can specifically style all these buttons based on the classes that have been added to the class list and based on the interaction as well. You'll see this one would have disabled as well, so you can actually use that to style it as well. And then finally, just so that I'll quickly show loading as well, so you have that. So it's a large, it's loading, and it's full width. So that's how we've created this button component, which is really flexible, but it is headless at the same time. One last thing that we can test is the icon that we have added here. So if we can quickly just go to our home component, and let me just pass icon here. Now for the icon, we need to pass the node. So let's just pass an image node here, and I've copied an icon URL. So I'm just quickly going to test if it works. Now you can see the icon has been added. Right. So I hope you liked this video, and we have created a button component, a headless button component that can be styled with any kind of styling system or styling framework. I hope this helps you in your learning as well as in your actual projects. So I'll get back to you in the next video with another component. So we will possibly be doing drop down or models, and that will be slightly more involved and complicated. I hope you really liked the video. Thanks a lot. See you in the next video.